Hello, and welcome to the Not Quite Otaku Anime Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Joe,
And I'm Brandon.
who is your other host, and we'll be doing a little segment today that we like to call Does It Hold Up?, where we're going to be talking about anime from the past, so it could be the 70s, 80s, 90s. We, just before recording, realized even the early 2000s.
2000s counts as old enough, I think, to go back. Because
Yeah,
we were teenagers in the early 2000s, so I think it holds up.
Yeah, so I think anime has changed a lot since 2000, 2005 even. So yeah, I mean, now we're looking at 15 years ago, which is insane. So yeah, it's a little segment we're going to be doing, and amongst other things, where we take a look and see if some of those classic anime that we enjoyed back then, are they still worth watching, and do they hold up? So I guess first, Brandon, we should probably talk about what it is that we'll be discussing.
So we're gonna talk about the original Ghost in the Shell movie. So that is the 1995 version, I believe. But before we get into that, how about you go into a little bit? What's your experience with Ghost in the Shell as a product, like altogether? What have you watched and consumed of Ghost in the Shell media?
Yeah, that's actually a good thing to bring up. Well, I think first off, one thing I wanted to bring up first was when we were deciding on what one of the first things we wanted to do was Ghost in the Shell, is because for both of us, this was one of I think really the first adult anime that we watched. I think we got it from Blockbuster, so we were kids.
Yeah, I want to say I was probably around 11, 12 years old, which would have put you around 14, 15.
Right? So we were like teenagers. So before that, I think our experience with anime was, Dragon Ball Z and what was on after school, basically, on Toonami. So
yeah. So Dragon Ball Z, Inuyasha.
Well, Inuyasha was later at night. That was later. But it was Dragon Ball Z, Ronin Warriors, which I don't. Well, that could be a whole nother thing.
Samurai Troopers,
but
apparently.
yeah, but it was called Ronin Warriors. I still am confused by the whole thing. I remember G Gundam was also on there. So, this was what else? I can't remember everything else for the afternoons.
But either way, not too important.
Not too important. No.
I think the point is yes. This is probably the first mature piece of anime either of us consumed.
And definitely one that I think we back when it was you couldn't have a streaming service, or really the internet even was basically still kind of in its infancy.
We still had
dial-up. You still had dial-up, and so to get your hands on anime was not as easy as it is today. You had to go to, I remember the local library was a good spot. I remember and Blockbuster had an anime section, so you kind of had to just pick and choose what you could get from those. And this was one of the things. So to answer your question, that was a very roundabout way to get to it. But to answer your question was my experience with Ghost in the Shell would be our first, when we both as, younger watched it. And I've watched it multiple times since then, showed it to my wife. I've watched it just for the heck of it. That would be that, and then Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, I think, was really one of those series, again, that was on Adult Swim. So that was one that I really liked. So Ghost in the Shell, the first season, second season of standalone complex was not as much of my favorite, but
yeah.
And then I've seen the first episode of the Arise OVA, and I have not watched it since.
Yeah,
I watched it once, maybe it might have been a year or two ago, and that's. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. There's the one Solid State Society, one movie I've watched. I have that. I haven't, and I didn't see the movie. But what about you?
So I have only seen. Let's see. So I watched, like we were saying, the Ghost in the Shell movie somewhere in the range of 15 to 20 years ago.
I thought you were going to say 15 to 20 times. I was going to be like, oh my God.
Oh, no. 15 to 20 years ago. I have not watched it since until this past week.
Okay.
Or a couple weeks. Yeah. But until this time watching it for the purposes of Does It Hold Up, I have not watched that movie since I was a small child. And I've watched Standalone Complex, and I really liked that. But that I watched when I was a little bit older. So Ghost in the Shell, when I think of Ghost in the Shell, I think of Standalone Complex.
Yeah, so do I.
Like those iterations of the characters are kind of what I have in my head because I was very young when I watched this movie. It's really had fallen out of my memories. And I haven't watched anything other than that. We didn't even finish the entirety of the second season of Standalone Complex.
I totally forgot though.
Or the second iteration.
There's another one because we watched it together. We watched the second movie. We watched Ghost in the Shell 2: Innocence. I totally didn't even say that.
Yeah.
So that's actually.
And I have seen the Scarlett Johansson Hollywood live action movie, which is it is definitely not Netflix Death Note bad, but it's not a great adaptation.
I had no faith in it, so I just didn't want to waste my time watching it. I don't know. I don't think I'll ever watch it, to be honest. So whatever.
Yeah, you don't need to necessarily.
Yeah, I'm not missing anything. I'll finish Arise before I watch that. But so I mean, to give.
So neither of us are really experts in the field of Ghost in the Shell.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what it takes to be an expert in Ghost in the Shell, but I will say we've watched. I mean, what else is there that we're really missing though?
So, well, neither of us have read the manga,
true. Yeah.
and neither of us have really watched the Arise series.
Okay.
There's a couple other movies in there, I think, as well.
Well, I said the Solid State Society, which is off of Ghost in the Shell standalone complex. There's some. I have to look at it again, and I know there's. I think one movie that, if I remember correctly, is just it condenses the story of standalone complex into basically the length of a movie, but it just takes the series and cuts it down. If I might be wrong about that. Don't remember, but yeah, but other than that, yeah. So I guess you're right. I mean, I guess we haven't read the manga. The director Mamoru Oshii, I've seen some other stuff. Like, I took the time to watch Angel's Egg or Angel Egg. I can't remember if it's possessive or not.
Yeah.
But I did watch that. You can watch it on YouTube if you're really curious. Which it's definitely, you got to be in the mood for it. It's a really early thing, and maybe one day we'll watch it and talk about it. But and then I know he had something to do with Jinro. I don't know if he was the director, the writer, but that's another thing. And Skycrawlers is the other one, which I've never actually been able to get through. Yeah. I started watching it a couple times. I've tried watching it twice. I think it's just one of those things I had to be in the mood for.
Yeah. And out of those things you've mentioned, I think Jinro is the only one I have any familiarity with. So.
Yeah. So I guess, like, without any more, I guess that kind of gives a good setup of what we're doing. So I think we're just gonna we'll just talk about, does it hold up?
Yeah.
Anything that jump out to you that started off first that you want to, like, just start off with?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think the opening scene.
I was totally just thinking that
was so very because the opening scene is probably the most iconic scene of the movie, right? You could argue maybe the water scene as well,
and the ending. But definitely.
But it's up there.
Yeah. Well, so real quick, just before we go in depth in that. So one of the things I noticed when watching it is that my memory of this movie is those three scenes. Like, it literally is every time if I think of what Ghost in the Shell is, it is the first opening scene with the diplomats, and she kicks in the window and everything and shoots it up, and then the water, like where she fights the guy in the water and the garbage truck, and then it is the end where she's getting ripped apart by the big machine, and then, like, everything in between, I feel like I have amnesia.
And I think I'm right there with you, and I think that's a fair assessment of what this movie is as a whole. Mm-hmm. It's some iconic moments with a lot of noise in between it that isn't that important. At least that's my overall view of it. But let's just start, because that opening scene, everyone who's seen anything Ghost in the Shell probably knows it. Jumps down the side of the building, kills the bad guy, and
camouflage
disappears into nothing. Camouflage disappears into nothing. Shows off their awesome animation techniques. Mm-hmm. End scene. Cut to start credits. That scene. So in my head, growing up, and especially just because I haven't watched Ghost in the Shell since I was a kid, I've had this idea that Section 9 was this, like, great government unit of the government that helps fight corruption within the government and is, like, a force of good. Mm-hmm. And actually paying attention to this scene and the one that follows just totally recontextualizes. Like, the person she killed was a foreign diplomat that was trying to grant someone asylum to escape the country. And they killed them because trying to handle it diplomatically would have been too bothersome. And that just, like, completely recontextualized what Section 9 is to me. As, like, oh, no, this is, like, just a government hit squad.
So, wait.
They're not necessarily good people.
So, one of the things that, so I'm trying to remember now, because we watched this a little bit ago before we were able to record, so I'm trying to remember some things, like, so the guy that she actually, so the part that I think is totally, when I watched it, I was like, okay, this part always is just so amazing to see in a way, when she shoots through the window and the guy's head just explodes and you see the spinal cord wiggling
the
around.
Spine is hanging out.
And so the guy she kills is actually, I don't know why I thought that was the foreign diplomat that she killed, because the foreign diplomat was seeking asylum in Japan, but she actually killed the Japanese diplomat.
No, so the foreign diplomat was not seeking asylum. The foreign diplomat was looking to grant asylum to a Japanese citizen.
Okay.
And so they killed the foreign diplomat, and then that's what the follow-up, after the credits roll, there's a conversation between the chief of Section 9 and the Minister of Defense, I think is his title. And he basically tells him, like, thanks for doing that, because handling this diplomatically would have been troublesome.
Right, yeah.
So thanks for just killing the guy.
Yes.
It's like, oh.
It's
okay, so right away just puts a whole new light on what I think Section 9 is.
That's true, like, that they really are the government hit squad. Because a lot of the stuff they do is, it's like it's bothersome to the other branches, and they always try to overstep what Section 9 does, or interfere, or, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it makes sense that they're kind of,
because Section 9 is the perspective character we're given. Like, I think it's just adds to that implication that they're the good guys in a little bit, but, like,
that it's,
I don't know if it's necessarily there's anyone who's the good guys in this.
That it's all the other branches of government are and parts of the military are getting in the way of Section 9 doing their job, which, like you said, as kids and stuff too, when you're watching it, you would immediately put them as the good guys doing the good thing, but that actually might not be the case. That it's just underhanded government work that, isn't necessarily that far off from our own world, where there's sorts of things that, all over the world that happen. So,
and I think there's a lot of that in this movie that we can go into later. But but what are your first impressions, I guess?
Yeah, I think, like, for me is, one of the things that I really thought about is that that opening scene is super iconic, and really sets up just really well. Again, one thing I think about this is that although it is from the mid 90s, I think probably partly because it is a movie, and not like like a series or anything like that, the animation still looks pretty good. And I mean, like I said, with the part where she blows the guy's head off and the spine and everything, the animation of all that is just, it still looks really good and detailed.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I think they do a good job. Like, the world in general is pretty dark because it's set in this kind of futuristic, everything's just gray buildings.
Cyberpunk.
It's kind of like trying to go cyberpunk, a little dystopian feel. So when, like, the blood explodes out, that really creates a good contrast.
Yeah.
And I think they use color really well in a colorless world.
Yeah. And I think, like, to kind of go back to what we were talking about with sort of the memories of the movie being sort of these iconic scenes, just where it's like, you have these three moments that really stand out. I think, and you kind of started to talk about it, that is probably my biggest, I guess, criticism of the movie, is I do feel like there are parts that really hit and are really powerful, and then there are parts that it is a lot of information dump and political jargon, and you really need to be paying attention to follow it. And even if you are, I don't know if you'll necessarily get all of it.
I think that's fair, and it's we'll talk outside of those three iconic moments. It's like you said, it's a lot of political jargon, a lot of just straight conversation, and then it's a lot of just filler chase scenes. I feel like 50% of the movie is just action chase sequences.
Yeah. Well, and so like, but one of the things I will say with like good moments, just watching, I think going on to the next scene that really stood out to me is the part where, they're trying to find this, I guess hacker is a right would be the word for with the garbage
Yeah.
truck, and I mean, that scene with the water, again, that fight scene, and where he's getting twisted around and the water splashing. And again, it kind of is, what's interesting is that it is one of those moments where you have some light because the sun or the sky is really like light blue and almost white.
Yeah, and they have play with the reflection on the water a little bit, and that like provides a little bit more light in the scene.
Yeah, and so that, like, I think that maybe that might be why it actually stands out a little bit more to me, because it is this, like you said, in this sea of grays and darkness, there's this one moment where all of a sudden you can see the sky. But also part of what it is, I think that's really, I guess, touches on in a way a very human element of things, is with the garbage truck. He's not actually driving, but the other guy who keeps showing the photo of his wife and his daughter, and I think his daughter and everything, and then the moment when he realizes that that's not real, and the dog, and that idea of really believing that something is true and having it just be taken away from you. And I don't know, just to me, it really made me start to think about, even as human beings, just with our memories and how we remember things, and when we misremember stuff and someone maybe tells us, no, it was actually like this, or I don't know. I just think that's like a really cool thing that it brings up in the movie, just as an introspective thing to think about.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the major themes of the movie, is what is reality and what makes you human, or a person, however you want to define that. Like, what makes you more than just a machine, or more than an animal.
Mm-hmm. And that's, I mean, when thinking about it too, is for 1995, a lot of the stuff is really timely, and
that's what impressed me the most. So I don't know if this is actually dated as to when this is supposed to be. I know at the beginning they just say sometime in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
But even the opening header sequence, not the actual scene, but before that, you get a little text on screen, mm-hmm. and it's, in the not too distant future, when the corporate media, I don't remember exactly what they use, but basically when corporate powers control so much information that they really control the world, but governments still exist. It's not to the point where governments don't exist yet. And it's like, that's kind of what we're just seeing happening in the real world right now, that these massive corporations that control information have just as much influence as governments do at times.
Yeah, like you think about today with social media, you have Facebook and Google, and I mean, I guess you could kind of even lump Amazon into that in some ways, but anyone that's these major corporations that control our information and data.
Well, like you can lump Amazon in that, in the sense that like Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post.
Yeah. So
like Amazon itself, maybe it's harder to lump into that directly, but it's the same person who controls the most valuable company in the world, also controls one of the largest media outlets in the United States.
And has more wealth than, I don't know how many people it is combined. I've seen that stat, but so yeah, it's like, so you have this, I mean, so that in and of itself, I think, is really what's just so interesting about it, that it's still relevant today. So in terms of thinking about a movie, you could watch something maybe from, even like, just talking about regular film, something from the 90s, and it's just like, oh, okay, this is totally whatever. But I think anime in general has done a pretty good job of predicting like where things are going. I mean, between this and then Serial Experiments Lane, which I think came out 97 or something, and that was, I mean, some of the stuff that had is just totally on point with where we're going and where we are with technology.
Yeah, and that was impressive to me. And also, just I'll touch on very briefly the actual idea of the ghost, mm-hmm. which is being able to like download an interface directly through your mind. That's Elon Musk is kind of working on a thing like that right now. Where it's the Neuralink implant. He says in 5-10 years we might be able to interface directly with computers through this chip you implant in your brain, and that's like kind of the baseline level of what a ghost is. So
Yeah, it's. I mean, that's like part of. I mean, because even in like in standalone complex, just to kind of not to get too far off track, but with the Tachikomas, when they start to have individual thoughts, and
yeah,
it's sort of having a ghost and free will essentially. So it's just like which then blurs the line of between these robots and these quote humans.
yeah.
Um,
But yeah, I think back to just in general on Ghost in the Shell,
mhm.
like for this movie, there was a lot more forgettable to me in it than memorable.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, I fell asleep when the Major and Bato are talking on the boat. I had to rewatch that scene because it
That's
just
actually kind of a
really
nice
was
scene,
not.
though. I'm trying to remember exactly what
It
happens,
is,
but I remember
and
feeling.
it's not like particularly a boring scene in and of itself. Like it adds a little. It certainly explores Bato a little more, which is
Mhm.
nice. But I think at that point, like I said, the garbage truck chase scene up leading up to the fight, I was not engaged in that. And then after that, you're getting a whole lot of discourse. And yeah, I just was kind of. I was not into it as a whole from the experience of the movie, so that I fell asleep at that part and had to watch it again.
I will say Ghost in the Shell. If you want some anime on in the background and feel like falling asleep, I have fallen asleep to it before too. So it's not a bad movie to pop on if you want to take a nap, but also have something in the background. Um,
Yeah,
I will say the soundtrack into is that's something. If we want to talk about what stands out is iconic. That kind of, I guess I describe it as a high pitch chanting almost. It sounds like almost like a youth choir, but
yeah,
not as choral. I don't know. That's something that I think is really when I think of Ghost in the Shell, I think of that when it's after the main, when the whole diplomat scene, and it's setting up before the scene with the garbage truck. I think is where it is. And
yeah.
so I think in that sense, I mean, sound wise, I mean, everything else sounds good. Which though it does bring me to the voice acting. I watched in English. What did you watched it in English?
I did watch it in English.
Okay, so yeah, subs and dubs is a whole nother thing. But I watched. So well, I just want to ask you, what is your thought on the dub?
On the dub, for a dub made in 1995, it is pretty good, but I think it's really hit or miss character by character.
Uh huh.
I think the Major is not. I think that's pretty good. I don't think it's terrible. I think like Togusa is pretty bad,
Yeah.
and I think it's just kind of overall for a mid 90s, it's fine. But I don't think it. I think it's not exceptional.
Well, so for me, the thing is, and I was curious what your thoughts were because of that. So it's interesting that you thought like the Major's pretty good. I am so used to now hearing the voice actor of the Major from Ghost in the Shell standalone complex. Which I forgot
Okay.
there's that new Netflix one too, which I have not seen
Yeah.
yet, where it's the CG looking.
Yeah.
But she does the voice of Major for that. So like I'm so used to hearing the Major's voice in that way, and I think it's also too that I think she just is. And this could be, I mean, a number of things. It could have been the direction. It could be whatever. But like, she is much more animated, even though she's still playing a very subdued character. Whereas I
Yeah.
feel like in the original film Ghost in the Shell, the the acting is just almost too monotone to the point where it can really just and sometimes just even the reactions to things I'm like I'm just like I feel like you might have a little more something on it.
I can fully understand that, and I would say that was probably a directorial choice because it is pretty uniform across the board for this movie that everyone is very subdued, it seems.
Which is funny though because like Bato and the Chief are the same voice actors. They carry over into standalone complex and so on. So it's interesting that they to me sound really good.
Yeah, yeah,
But I will
I
say
do
that
think the chief is one of the better ones overall in this movie. I think Bato struggles mostly probably because of his dialogue, not necessarily the voice acting. But
yeah.
I think the writing for his character was not so great.
Well, and then Togusa, I totally agree with you that I prefer Standalone Complex. Crispin Freeman, I know, is the voice actor for the English one. I prefer his Togusa over this one any day. I think Togusa is really boring in this movie.
Oh yeah, he's basically a non-factor, which he's a character that becomes much more interesting in Standalone Complex, which is probably why it's even harder to go back and watch this. Where, like, he's a driver basically. That's all he does. He shoots a tracker on a car. That's all he does.
That's probably his highlight. is the tracker moment, and then everything else.
Oh, I
is
shot two.
Like, yeah.
Okay. Good.
Everyone
good
else
job,
just
Togusa.
complaining about his outdated gun, and that's about it. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah. So I guess for me, it is just, and I'm thinking about even just some of the other characters. Yeah, like it's. I think that's a good way to characterize it. Is that it is pretty good for a mid-90s dub.
Which means it's bad by today's standards, is effectively what that is.
Kind of, yeah. I guess that's kind of like basically like it's like I mean, but it's listenable, it's watchable. If you're gonna,
it's certainly not like it's certainly not intolerable.
Yeah, and like there's no glaring mouth flaps, missing dialogue, things like that. Where that's like a whole nother thing. But and then I guess, to talk about the other kind of big scene is the final scene, or one of the final scenes is the
final action sequence.
Yeah, where the Major then confronts the main villain, which I'm blanking on. Do you what?
The Puppet Master.
Puppet Master. Thank you. I was like, what is the name? That sequence is awesome. Like, that whole thing in what I guess looks kind of like I guess it has a glass roof. I don't know why I want to say greenhouse. There are no plants in there.
No, it seems to be a church or house of worship of sort, I think.
Really?
When they're panning across one of the walls, it has what appears to be inspired by the tree of Yggdrasil. I didn't get a good look at it, but it's like this
I know
world
what
tree.
you're talking about. Yeah.
World tree growing up with a bunch of different Latin words. So I just kind of got a religious vibe off of that. I don't know if
I got a greenhouse vibe apparently. Like, it was like the one tree in the glass roof. I'm like, oh, obviously this is.
So I don't know. Maybe that's kind of what I got. The vibe I got off of that. That was the only thing they showed that really characterized it. I'd have to go look at it closer to see what exactly like that represents. But I got
Tree of
religious
Life
vibe
vibes.
off of it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I gotta say, like, that is, so if you fell asleep during it, I think that's like the one part where you're gonna wake up again. Because just the action, just even simple things, when they're shooting with the rifles and the bullets and the dents, and then the part where Major's getting ripped apart essentially, or her body's ripping apart because she's trying to rip open the top of the, I guess the lid of the tank, so to speak, or whatever.
Yeah, to try to open the hatch to get in the tank, and she's not strong enough. Her body rips out into many pieces.
Right, which is like, so I guess there's the thing is where, people talk about with the influence of this movie, such as The Matrix, where that scene in The Matrix, I've seen the stuff where it is basic. They pretty much shot for shot in some ways duplicate it. I don't know, I guess that's just like an interesting thing to think about in terms of the impact of Ghost in the Shell on pop culture.
Yeah, that's, I'm sure, one of the many, I didn't really look into researching of what other things have blatantly just kind of copied off Ghost in the Shell, but I'm sure there's a lot of them out there.
Yeah.
But regarding that scene specifically, I was a little disappointed. Like, that is such a good peak moment. I agree with you that's like super iconic and is this awesome moment. And then 10 seconds later, it's ruined by Bato, Deus Ex Machina, just showing up with a big gun. And it's like, and that's literally what he says. And it's just like it's such a downer part after that. Like, just kind of took all the air out of the room for me.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back to that part because, like, I remember he comes in because then he's able to save the Major. So it's, obviously, But I will say the sequence leading up to all of that too. I think they're trying to get to her because that's when Togus is driving and they're trying to track this, and then Bato's
Yep,
going
and
after her.
Bato's in his own car driving.
And I mean, I think that is really it's interesting to watch leading up. But yeah, but I do, and I'm trying to think back to this, and I'm trying to remember more. But something I wrote down a couple things here and there. But the interesting thing is then at the end when the major's body is a child's body.
So that's a new body. That's not the major's body.
Or
that
yes,
is a brand,
sorry,
that
yeah,
is a brand new body.
yeah. So I guess what I should say that her ghost goes into this
Yeah.
new body, and it's the body of a child. Just I don't know. I just thought that was something that was interesting, and I don't know. Maybe I'm trying to read into stuff too much or something, but symbolically going to I don't know back to a child.
Well, so no, it's directly symbolic of because what the ghost that occupies that body is half the major, half the puppet master. So it's
That's
supposed to
right.
be that's their child. Is I think the symbolism
That's what it
they're pretty
was.
directly going for there. That is
See,
that is a child of a ghost that of the major who is basically a ghost who used to be human but no longer has any human parts, and then a complete AI, which is what the puppet master is. You know,
That's
just a
right.
complete artificial intelligence, never had any human parts ever.
And
that's
that's
what
okay.
this child is occupied by both of them to it doesn't, directly say if they're just kind of like two talking heads with each other or if they've kind of merged into one being. It's not entirely clear on that, but yeah, that's their child is what that's going for.
Okay, that's so I literally wrote down child body symbolic was what I wrote. So I knew there was something, yeah, so I think that was something that's just a cool tie-in then and way to kind of wrap it up because that is something in the sequence when she's in the brain or linked with the puppet master.
Yeah.
Before that, I think it's just that stuff's really interesting. I think that those parts where the kind of the conversations between the major and the puppet master, those are the parts that I think in terms of like an information dump or maybe getting a little bit heady. I think those because I think if you're gonna watch Ghost in the Shell, part of it is the intellectual I'm trying to think of like a good word, not gymnastics, but just like sort of the kind of the what's going on
maybe.
Yeah, I guess yeah.
Right.
Engagement's like a good word. Is like, you're not gonna watch it to like, it's not like watching like Naruto or something. You're watching it for maybe a little bit of a like intellectual engagement as well. And so sometimes that's good, but again, it's sort of I think back to Star Wars Episode 1 where they added so much political intrigue into it. I think it was yeah, and then
Yeah.
everyone was like super bored with it. It's kind of one of those things where it's like too much of this political stuff where I think that might work better in a series where you can stretch that out and build the world. When you just kind of are dumped into it and you're just trying to figure out who's who and who represents what, it gets really boring. But the parts between the major and the puppet master discussing what it is to even be human, and I think those parts are really good too.
Yeah, and I think those are representative of the core like message of what this movie wants to be. And I'm not going to speak for whoever, made these choices, but like it seems like the action is included to keep people engaged, and the real ideas they want to get across are those expositions of what does it mean to be human, and what is our role in the world essentially.
Yeah, that I'd agree. I think like because especially with anime, there are definitely some more intellectual, heady anime out there. But in terms of if you're going to release this and I mean obviously it's based on a manga, so that's something else too. You're using source material there,
Yeah.
so But if you're going to explore any of these things to reach a mass audience, you're probably going to want to kind of have like dangle a carrot in a way to bring so people will kind of go for it and then they'll stick around for the existential crisis.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you lead with the existential crisis, you're going to alienate 99% of your audience already.
Yeah,
you're going to have some people that are really into it, but you're going to paint yourself into a corner real fast.
Yeah, there's not going to be a Scarlett Johansson movie 30 I don't know how many years later was it.
Yeah, I think that was like 2017 maybe or something.
Yeah, so 20 some years later, some had a thought and it just left me. So, were you gonna say something?
No, I think that that covers pretty much everything I wanted to talk about with this. I will just say, do you want to just give a final idea of whether this is worth watching in 2020 or not?
Yeah, but before I do, this is just a weird thing. Did you notice the weird pronunciation of Bato?
Uh, no.
All right. Anyway,
No,
it bothered me.
I didn't. What? So what?
I think
what were they?
she'd say Bato or something, and I was so
Okay.
used to, again, this goes back to the standalone complex, like being so used to that dub that every time they'd say it, it drove me nuts. Um, yeah, I think just, I think one of the, to kind of start to come to a conclusion with it, I think the biggest things that I like about this is that it does, especially in, like we're saying, in a day and age where technology is such a part of our lives and we're so connected to it all the time, questioning what that is, questioning what it is to be human. There's a lot of thoughts about memories. I think about things like I'll talk to my sister about stuff, and there's certain things that she remembers certain ways or just remembers, period, and certain things I remember, and I'll say, oh, remember this time or this story, and then she'll just be like, I don't remember it, but it had such a big impact on me. And so I think, like, I guess, like, one of the things that it makes you think about is your memories, how real they are, how just you start to realize how fragile just being a human is.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that I enjoy about the movie, because I think that's just something I personally like to examine. But to give a does it hold up sort of judgment call, I'm going to say yes, but it's like a yes, but it's the highs are really high, the lows are not low in the sense of, oh my god, this is just awful and terrible anime, but it's just the action sequences are so good, some of the other sequences are so boring, but as a movie, for just kind of what it does for anime, pop culture in general, I feel like if you like anime, you should watch this movie. There's no reason you shouldn't. It's just one of those ones that I think if you're really interested in anime, if it's something you like and something you want, or something even you want to get into, there's no reason you shouldn't watch it. So I'd say it does, but not by much.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I would say it has enough iconic moments, but I think the biggest thing to me is, in a lot of ways, it is even more topical to 2020 than it was in 1995. And because of that, I would say it definitely holds up.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Real quick to what you're saying, though, I think also the lens through which you are looking at this movie really does impact how impactful it is for you, or how effective it is. Because, like you said, the stuff that they're talking about now, I think you're right, is more relevant and more possible and closer to reality than it was.
Than anyone would have ever imagined in 1995.
Yeah. So I think especially today.
Or I guess like in 1989, really. I think that's when the source material was written.
Yeah. So you're looking at, what? My math's terrible.
30 years.
30 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like 30 years ago, you're looking at all that stuff. It's just like, it's actually pretty amazing. So I think for that reason too, it is. So maybe I'm gonna back up a little bit on it. I'll say it's not a barely, because I'm thinking about some other stuff that I've watched and I'm like, oh yeah. No, I think you should watch it. I think, like you said, for those reasons, it's really relevant. I think, like we both agree, the action sequences, the iconic moments, they're iconic for a reason. Just be prepared to be in the headspace for some really heady stuff
and some really long exposition at times, or at least what feels like it.
Yeah. So I think both of us say, if you have not watched Ghost in the Shell, you definitely should. Be interested to hear maybe from people what other thoughts of it are,
especially a younger audience that did not watch this when they were kids.
Yeah, I think that's also a really big thing too, and I'd be curious as we go forward watching different things, like to view it from the view of having a personal attachment to something, as a kid, comparing that to if you watch something from, let's say, the 90s or whatever, but the first time you're seeing it is today. Because I just recently did that with watching, which is kind of funny that we're talking about it with Hollywood, but I watched Alita, the original anime, Battle Angel, and that was like a whole different thing watching that because I had never seen it before until now. And but one of the things I think I would kind of say that has, I mean, obviously there's a lot in common with Ghost in the Shell in terms of cybernetic stuff, but one of the things is, maybe this is a 90s thing, but some really iconic moments, some really great action, but there were some moments where I was like, I am kind of bored.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. But anyway, that's I'd be really interested to see what a younger generation thinks of the movie. Any final thoughts that you want to share?
No, I think that's all I had for today. I think we can wrap it up.
All right. Yeah, same for me. So thank you for listening, and we hope to join you soon.
Yeah, we'll catch you on the next one.